What's going on there, folks? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to some out there. It's the Earthmaster here on this Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. It's about 9:49 a.m. here along the West Coast in California. Latest earthquake activity shows a 3.3 down here into the, looks like the southern portion here, right off the coast of Costa Rica area. Having a little bit of earthquake activity, but that's kind of not the main picture right now. Main picture is going to be the space weather activity kind of ramping up right now from numerous sunspots and quite a few M flares kicking off overnight. Check out this graph here. This is the GOES X-ray flux 1 minute data showing activity overnight and this morning time period here with quite a few M flares kicking off here, really ramping up. Pretty much went from quiet conditions last night to a couple sunspots growing dynamically and increasing that threat of some flares. Now, we did see about 7 M flares overnight, late last night and this morning time period. I kind of want to show you guys real quick the 7 that I'm noticing here. The M flare category is going to be this line right here where the arrow is. You can see that little thin line, and the M X-ray flare class over here. Now, if you count these little tips here, these are the features of the flaring that's been popping off. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got to count that one as a 6th one because that one came right back up, and then 7 down here. Good possibility we could see potentially maybe an X flare from this activity that's just kicked up overnight and this morning period. Things are really picking up from a couple different sunspots. 3163, 3165. Of course, we were watching this one last night. This image right here is actually an older image, not the most recent image here. And unfortunately, surprisingly, the SDO site, which is the Solar Dynamics Observatory, the ones that we monitor, or the ones that monitor the data, are offline. They cannot be reached. So unfortunately, that kind of affects the latest imagery that we're able to look at. Even solarham.site or solarham.net site here is having trouble accessing that current data. But a couple of these sunspots here, we definitely got to watch for X flare potential. The flares so far, at least these guys, have only 3 set up here, but we know there's a lot more looking at the graph than the 3. The largest one so far looks to be the I'll stand by for a second here. It looks to be the M6.3, which is from this sunspot over here, 3165. Let me look at the graph here again, see if we had anything larger, because these guys are a little bit behind on their time. Yeah, it looks like that may be the largest one. But we had a couple strong flares, definitely some stronger flares kicking up here earlier this morning and overnight time period, and some of them may be Earth directed as far as if it did produce any CME. Unfortunately, we can't really view any of this data, so everything's kind of old up here. Not for sure what's going on with the SDO, but we're going to watch this. I would say there's definitely a higher threat currently than what these folks are putting out. Definitely an X flare potential. M flare obviously should be up around 60% at least. These guys will probably update their site a little bit later, but there's a lot going on right now with the solar weather activity, and it just comes out of the blue. Let me see if this one's working. Okay, this site's working a little bit, but this is not the SDO site. 3165, one of the culprits. 3163. Now, 3163 is definitely well into position here to shoot off any subsequent CME Earth-directed. A couple of these other sunspots as well, but the main ones that are popping off are going to be these 3163, 3165 regions. Watch that pretty closely because, man, things are just... It's amazing how these solar flares and sunspots can kind of come to life. Over the past couple days here, they've just been there. They've just been, just traveling across the disk here of the sun, and not a whole lot of effect, not a whole lot of large flaring, but that changed really quickly earlier, late last night, I should say, and early this morning, and now still currently happening. So Not a good time for the SDO folks to be down. Let me double check that one more time again. Yeah, data is offline for some reason. All right, so we'll continue to watch that, and I'm sure there is, again, a good possibility of seeing an X flare with this type of activity and the instability that's been created amongst quite a few sunspots overnight. So we'll watch that pretty closely. Earthquake activity. Let's go ahead and jump into earthquakes. Now, check out this map here, folks. This is pretty quiet. Not so much in terms of the West Coast and areas here, but look at the Western Pacific. This is almost unheard of, far as not seeing any activity out here across the Western Pacific. Now, let me bring up the Earthquake 3D globe and see if we have any activity in the microquake department, which we do. Looks like throughout the Indonesia area, but even so, this is still pretty quiet in terms of earthquake activity out this way. Some older movement there across the Kermadec Trench from yesterday. So we really haven't seen any major uptick across these areas. So I definitely would be on guard for some potential larger scale movement with this type of quiet activity. And also watching the West Coast here and areas along the Eastern Pacific. We've got that teeter-totter effect kind of leaning towards the West Coast right now. And we did have a 4.9 off the coast of Oregon about 4:30 in the morning today into the Blanco fracture zone. This area has shown a little bit of movement over the past week or so. Let's bring up the last 7 days, 2.5 and above. A little bit of activity along that fracture area itself. Some prior movement up here earlier in the week, and now we're getting some further activity, which I believe is putting a little bit further strain down here along the area of the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone, where we did see a little bit more earthquake activity overnight with a 2.2 and a 1.9 here down into the Cascadia. It's about 26 and 22 kilometers deep, which puts that down there into the subduction zone of the Cascadia. Pacific Northwest into Washington. Got a little bit of activity overnight as well. A couple ones in the region outside of Seattle, it looks like, in Yakima. Some movement around Mount St. Helens as well. Just very small microquakes. Into Nevada, some activity yesterday and also overnight, it looks like as well. 0.5, the latest quake. All right, let's see what we got for the rest of California, aside from our Clear Lake volcanic field. That's always continuing there. Still getting a little bit of activity around the Bay Area and also the creeping segment here. A pretty good cluster of earthquakes around Soledad up against the Diablo Range. This is a plate boundary, the San Andreas Fault. Plate boundary, of course, North American plate here to the east, Pacific plate to the west of this red line. And that's where we're seeing this earthquake activity accumulate on over the past 24 hours. Further down south into Southern California, not a whole lot of swarming going on. No major earthquake movement for now. Getting a little bit of a small microquake activity along the San Jacinto fault zone, San Jacinto fault zone area, and also over here around the coast north of San Diego. A little bit of activity kicking up. So we'll definitely watch this West Coast region today with the uncertainty here on the map of which is going to go first. I mean, kind of a little quiet period. We have noticed a little bit of activity into the center portion of the country as well, with one earthquake in the Dibble, Oklahoma area, 2.1 coming in within the last hour. Looks like some activity there in Texas earlier this morning as well, with a couple threes and some twos in our swarming area. Of course, out there in the oil fields and the wastewater disposal areas. Further east, we did see some movement outside the New Madrid zone late last night at 2.1. New Madrid zone sits within this area right here. You can kind of see it pretty nicely. A little feature. And also up against the Appalachian Mountains there at 2.0 coming in yesterday. Yellowstone National Park, nothing showing up here. Let me run across the seismographs and see what we have. It's a little choppy. Not a whole lot going on. Looks like maybe one little small spike of an earthquake this morning and a couple overnight, but nothing major going on there at Yellowstone National Park. Some movement across the area down south. Of course, we did see that movement, the latest earthquake down here on the globe. Looks like it was centered right off the coast of Costa Rica. Nothing really shown off or shown up here on this map because it was a smaller quake. And of course, USGS only issuing those 4.0 and above. Some activity after midnight off the coast of Mexico here along the plate boundary, Pacific plate boundary. And it looks like Colombia had some activity as well late last night with a 4.5. Down south, a little bit of movement here around the southern East Pacific Rise. That's just southwest of the Easter Island region. Looks like a 4.9 here on that area, and also some activity further to the east here along the Peru-Chile Trench last night. Now, definitely getting a little bit of activity kicking up down here in this region. In these fracture areas, this does tend to put a little bit of strain out here. See if I can keep my voice. Along the South America region, the plate movement map here kind of gives that general view with the Nazca plate divergent boundary right here. When those earthquakes tend to happen, we see that pressure kind of raise up here and increase across the areas of South America. That's going to be the Peru-Chile Trench, the arrows pointing towards the subduction zone. This is a general plate movement here. Really high stress area. There's quite a bit of accumulated stress in a short amount of time for this zone. So we'll watch that potentially for some further movement. But man, it is quiet across the western Pacific. In the Ballini Islands area, 5.6 came in late last night. That activity down there looks like it's just on the Antarctica side of the plate boundary. And again, further west, not a whole lot going on. 2 earthquakes here from yesterday. Eastern Afghanistan and the Indonesia area. But again, got to remember, we're still seeing some earthquake activity over here. Some very small microquakes, but not as active as what we've seen before. So a little uncertain as to where this is going to take place at. But I think we got some large-scale movement we need to watch for. Here pretty soon, with that quiet activity kicking off across the western Pacific. And of course the adjacent plates over here, Filipino plate, pretty quiet as well. Let's check out New Zealand here real quick. Let me refresh these maps. These are the drums around various areas here of North Island, New Zealand. Taupo volcano, super volcano. Not a whole lot of activity there at all over the last 24 hours. And if there was activity here, we would definitely see it across the park or across the graphs here. And we're definitely not seeing it. Tremor map. Let's go ahead and check tremor map here from last night. That did show a little bit of activity along the Cascadia, mostly there to the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone. And that kind of makes sense, right? With the increasing pressure out here, it would, of course, remember around the Blanco fracture zone, kind of pinpoints right where that pressure gradient would be. Would make sense to see the increasing pressure out here along the west coast affecting the tremor. These are basically not earthquakes, but 2 plates. Of course, the Juan de Fuca plate and the North American plate kind of picks up these little low vibrational frequencies as they slide past one another, kind of like a slow earthquake. It is a slow earthquake in a way. So that's what we're seeing being registered down there, about 45 kilometers down into the subduction zone of the Cascadia. So obviously strain is still building up here along the locked area, but at the same time we get that little bit of tremor, that I can't say release of pressure, but the further tightening, I kind of consider it, of the locked area, but also at the same time kind of getting that vibrational frequency down dip between the 2 plates there. All right, let's see. I think space weather is going to be the big deal for right now. Again, these guys haven't really updated their page. There's a lot that's not updated. A couple different solar sunspots there are more complex than what they have listed. There we go. I thought for a second this wasn't going to work. That's all we need, a whole space weather network to go down. But things are definitely crackling and popping here, folks, with M flares out of basically nothing over the past couple days. Things have been very minimal, and that's a pretty good sign here of possibly seeing maybe some X flare potential very soon with this type of setup and instability that's going on there. So we'll definitely watch that closely, and of course we'll report back on any major changes there. Let's see what these guys are reporting. This update was put out 10:30 UTC time, so just a little bit ago. Solar activity quickly sprung to life with 3 M-class solar flares and multiple C flares. The largest of this event was a M2.4. Now this is older. This looks like this was put out prior to all the other M flares. The latest update shows a 6.3 from 3165. But 3165, 3163, both regions are suddenly expanding in both size and magnetic complexity and could each be the source of additional solar flares. So major uptick in some solar weather activity. That's pretty awesome. Good to see, but man, I'm missing the latest data over here. It needs to be fixed pretty soon so we can look at these fields a little bit more closer. Inverted regions here, you can kind of see that as well, but let's see when this was put out. This doesn't even look, it shows 1213, so this is some older imagery as well. So we'll just wait for the newer images to pop up, hopefully, and we'll take a look at those once they do. All right, folks, have yourself a beautiful Wednesday, halfway through the work week. And again, man, is it quiet out here. We'll keep an eye on the Western Pacific, obviously, when things go quiet. We'll definitely could see a pretty good uptick across certain areas that really haven't been hit recently. But for now, I think we need to definitely keep an eye on the West Coast as well with that movement off the coast there of the Cascadia. Some movement down south along the Pacific Plate boundary here. And looks like a pretty good cluster right around the Costa Rica area as well. Some 3s and 2s and that 4 being listed in that region. And of course we got quite a few seismograph stations here on the left side of the screen, monitoring different stations across the area. Haven't really checked out Hawaii. Earthquake activity on the and the reason why I said that, because there's a little spike of an earthquake there around the Hot Caves Hawaii map. Let's check this out here real quick. There's not a whole lot popping off out there. We did have a 2.3 in the Pahala area. Mauna Loa, of course, still very quiet. Let's give a quick glance here of the volcano hazards map. See if anything's changed here at Mauna Loa recently, which I don't believe it has. I'm going to check out these seismograph stations. And not seeing a whole lot of earthquake activity, but I'm still seeing that odd reading. And if you've watched a couple of my last updates, it's this little, it looks like microquakes, but I'm not certain if those are actually microquakes or not. Kind of looks like maybe some wind events still, or something. Let me check out the windy map out here. I mean, it can't be windy forever on Hawaii, right? On the Big Island. I got to go back a little bit further. There is still some wind. Not a lot around Mauna Loa. So, yeah, I'm just kind of puzzled as to what those little readings are. They've been showing up for the past couple days since Mauna Loa and Kilauea's gone quiet. Let me check out this other station here. Kind of seeing that about the same here across the area. I definitely say I'm 99% certain that those are earthquakes. and USGS not reporting that. They're very small earthquakes, but definitely some type of increasing activity. Tilt meter here is definitely taken off pretty quickly. That's the inflation of Mauna Loa. Since it died down, it's gone up. Doesn't make sense. Well, I guess it kind of makes sense if it's maybe refueling down there below, getting that inflation back. But you think we would see a little bit of further eruption activity at the fissures, far as at least some minor activity kicking up. But it's just, it was kind of doing its thing there, and then all of a sudden it stopped, started to inflate back up. I'm still thinking there might be something jammed down there or blocked. Of course, there would be earthquake activity or harmonic tremor. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see the harmonic tremor on these seismographs, but there's these readings, that look like maybe small earthquakes, very small ones, but lots of them, hundreds of them, and they've been showing up, like I mentioned here, for the past 3 or 4 days, maybe since around the time that it stopped erupting. So I don't know if we're done with that yet. I can't really think if, I'm just a little puzzled. The USGS says there's nothing to worry about, that, these things come and go. But I think I'm gonna message one of them this morning, find out what this stuff is right here. What are these readings? Because now that the wind's died down out there, of course it seems like in between the islands here and south of the Big Island, there's some activity, but nothing really at the around the Mauna Loa area. Just very odd, very strange. Not that it's not windy, but that the wind stopped up there, and now we still have that the strange readings here across the graph. So either way, kind of puzzling. I will report back here once I find out something from these folks. More than likely, they'll probably just say it's who knows what. I'm not going to go out on the limb right now and guess, but we'll see what they have to say about it. And we'll be back a little bit later on tonight, folks. Unless something major happens, we'll keep an eye on that solar flare activity. If we get something in the X flare category, I'll jump back on here with an update that's pretty important, considering a couple of those sunspots there are facing Earth, and that could blast off a subsequent CME in our direction if it does take place. Until then, we'll catch you guys a little bit later on tonight, about 5 or around 6 or 7 tonight, my time, for the latest update this evening. Take care, folks. We'll catch you guys later.